On the afternoon of the 7th, we're here to continue our ongoing discussion, potential sale or lease of county-owned properties. Last week, we voted to continue leasing several properties, and we left that up in the air as to how and how we would advertise, et cetera. So that's something that we need to discuss today. Last week, we also said I just reread the minutes, that we would list out some potential land that we were considering for potential sale. I think that's a potential land for potential sale would be about the strongest we could say at this point, because a lot of research would need to be done. But I created a list, which I have a couple extra copies of right there. You can join us at the table. You are P and Z.
I know.
And he's got our back, so.
In the background.
Okay, so anyway, that's a list of lands that the county has received interest in the last few months, of people interested in purchasing specifically. So I guess, Commission, let's start with the purchase, the list of county properties to consider selling. We already voted last week on the first parcel ending in 2700. We voted to go ahead and try and market the Government Gulch piece. That relates to the second one from the bottom, the transfer station. The same person who might be interested in buying Government Gulch would prefer to purchase land at the transfer station. But I was noticing that, and this is a question of P and Z, that the transfer station is listed as all as one parcel. So what would have to happen if we decided to do something there?
So,
would we leasing that land?
Nothing's been put in any kind of an agreement or stone. There was a whole bunch of thought and talk and actions and the projects that had happened, but nothing had been solidified. So we do have any number of options at our disposal. So with that, yes, it's one large parcel. In a number of years ago, I don't know when we did that project, but it was 5 or 6 plus years ago. That front area was predominantly a hole. It was a large depressed area. And so there became a project, and during that time, the community, through DEQ and the Coeur d'Alene Trust, they were doing a Fill the Holes program. And with that, they went around, DEQ went around and identified numerous places where they could lay down waste material from project sites and put those in there. They called them LURs, limited use repositories, and they became individual projects. The Osborne Fire Station is built on top of one, and the parking lot across the street from that fire station is a big fill project. And I think 7 or 8 other projects were done throughout the county. I'd have to go find them, look them up. We did a bunch of research with DEQ to outline a variety of places and do a bunch of due diligence on those. So I have pretty good experience with those. Many of them we found to be in the floodplain and other issues with filling the floodplain. So many of them didn't happen. But anyway, so the transfer station ended up being a really good project. I forget the number of cubic yards, but it was a very large amount. It took them 2 seasons to fill it up.
Explain where the front of the transfer station is. Is that the main public access,
I
or?
literally produced this about 8 minutes ago.
Okay.
So,
We were talking about our transfer station.
Yeah.
so I know I have a file somewhere from back in the day that it sure has all kinds of construction drawings in it. That was on an old computer. We have to get with BJ, figure out where that data is from the computer, or where is it hiding in our system. But I whipped this together to give us something to talk about.
Okay.
So the area in blue is the transfer station. Here's the buildings, and here's the entrance, here's the back office building, and the farthest entrance and the main entrance for everybody. When they did this area in red are roughly the way we designed it. And again, I just whipped these out. So these numbers are not concrete, but they're close to the idea to identify some places where we could potentially put some other kind of use. And obviously with some tie to waste management, because there's always been long talk about green waste, and now we have the curtain burner there that I'm assuming is going up here. And so we're going to have that lay down area. We talked about the white metals and the heavy metals materials having a place here to to do that with rather than haul them off somewhere. And as other recycling businesses may or may not want to get into business, we'd have an opportunity here to do that. Or the county can expand its waste management if that ever became, a reality. We'd have some room to build buildings and we'd have room for entrance. So there's 3 commercial entrances off of Silver Valley Road that conceivably could be for commercial uses. Because this is a county facility and we wouldn't want necessarily the public coming and going within our public facility, there may end up needing to be a fence along the background to separate us from them. If that was needed, maybe it's one big compound that's only open the same time the transfer station. So that's never been figured out. And so this identifies these spots that potentially could be. The 1.4 acres is this whole area this way. I put the 3/4 acre for this side on this side of the billboard sign. And it's kind of also the topography drops off. So this area up here is higher than down there. And then these spots could be those locations where we may be able to put together some sort of a deal with somebody. The thought was it could be, county use, or it could be a leased space, very similar to the airport where somebody could come in and get into a lease agreement with the county to build a building, operate a use there. They would own the building, they could buy and sell the building, but they would lease the land from the county. Another option would be to do a subdivision and subdivide off some pieces here and then create pieces fee simply that you could sell to somebody. Because it is county property. It's not bound by any other particular agreements. The LUR agreement for the fill would transfer with anybody else. So you're building on top of a repository, but there's all kinds of agreements with the EQ that you would not, similar to the Maverick deal, similar to the fire station, any of those other ones that were built on there, they're protected by those covenants to be able to build a building there. So that was the option. It simply sat for a number of years with nobody proposing to do anything. The other day when the guy came in asking about the lease for the property up Government Gulch, because he was simultaneously looking to purchase that business from Dave Treaterman, and Dave Treaterman was, okay, fine, here's my business, but I've got a lease on this property from the county. And oh, by the way, the commissioners just decided to put a timeout on leases. That put everybody in a little bit of a, whoa, wait, what does that mean? So this guy legitimately was like, what does that mean? So in my talking to him, I said, well, you might, if you need more acreage or you need more land, this might be an idea for you. Of course, he jumped on it and ran with it, and we're not quite there yet. Our wheel moves much slower than we'd like it to, but so here we are with that. We've got an opportunity for somebody to come in and do something. We have to really vet out, is that even a compatible use there? How many acres does he need? He may look at this and decide it's not enough acres.
If our county keeps growing, we may need room to grow our waste
transfer station.
management.
So we
that concerns me too.
we definitely want to consider that. And we took use of the land because before it was very useless for development of any kind. But now it is usable for something. And so whether we can expand our services or our abilities, that certainly is our option. And we can do partly. We don't have to do all of it. We can do part of it. I think this area down here will stay some area where we can park vehicles and park trailers and park stuff that we maintain.
Mm-hmm.
These 2 areas, when they did it, they stubbed in sewer and water and power. There's already power going across. So the utilities are stubbed in for us. They did 3 of those as part of the deal. And so that's pretty advantageous. And again, there's those commercial accesses there. So,
Yeah.
Is it already surveyed?
Pardon?
Is it already surveyed?
No, there's the construction drawings from the project, and that would certainly get us started because then there's pretty concrete dimensions and placement of where stuff are. Depending on what we needed to do, a lease agreement would be on a specific area. We'd have to go in and probably survey that leased area.
Okay.
And or if we were going to do a subdivision would be on the county to do. So there'd be the surveying expense and the expense of going through that process.
Is there any rules on subdivision that make these smaller pieces something we can't divide?
Nope, not in an industrial, not in this.
Not in
zone,
industrial.
M2 or 3. It's industrial zoning, so there's no minimum lot size.
So, commission, what I'm gonna suggest is that we put this on the list for properties to consider selling, and that part of that consideration is further input from P&Z, input from the solid waste department on their long-term plan, what they see and what they're using. I know some of this is already planned for the burner, equipment parking.
Some of their concerns that they keep, I mean, they're already so busy and having a hard time keep
For
up.
sale or lease, possibly.
If we put it on this list to consider selling and then we decide that that's not the option, we want to go with leasing, we would just bring it,
Okay.
take it back to the next meeting. But if we put it on this list, then I think we go ahead and pursue the research. I think we need to get solid waste input, meet more with Trish and Dan and talk through that part and we have this potential buyer. We would of course be putting the land up for bid or some kind of a competitive, a price. We'd have to have it appraised.
Having a way to advertise it or just to get it known in the community through the real estate folks that, hey, there's potential here. So when businesses come to town and say, where can I find 3 acres? Where can I find a 3/4 acre piece? You can make it available. Literally nobody knows this is available. Everybody just assumes or has thought, well, it's just more of the transfer station. It's full of gravel now. So they don't really, only a handful of people really knew, other than DEQ and Coeur d'Alene Trust and those folks that knew why we did it. But that was the impetus, was to create this option for us.
So I don't know if we can meet the timelines of this person that's interested in the purchase. We don't, we'd still have to open it up for a bid and everything else, but if we put it on the list, then at least we could pursue the research and make a decision in the future, hopefully in the near future, on whether we want to sell it or not.
Okay.
Well, given this
I
is the
agree
time.
I agree with Tracy, if we do want to expand our structure there for the solid waste, we'd have room to expand, but
yeah. And that's what we said, I was part of the commission 32 years ago that set this land aside. It started the construction on the solid waste and we did that with the idea of expanding, but we had a big hole and we didn't know what to do with. I suggest that we consider putting it on the list, doing the research to sell, and then make a final decision after we have more answers from solid waste and everybody included.
Okay.
Does that work for you guys?
Yeah.
I would motion then that we add the transfer station parcel ending in 8,500 to the potential properties to sell potentially or lease potentially part of it, but we're putting it on this list while we do the research. And again, making it clear that we're going to get input from solid waste and everybody else before we do anything.
Okay.
I'll second.
Second, any further discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll put that on the list as a potential, and we'll be talking with you guys more about that and get everybody else's opinion on this thing.
When I find some more of that information, I'll be able to have a more reasonable conversation with John
Seguin.
Sequin.
Yeah, he's wanting me to call him.
See if I can't help him figure out what's going to work best for him.
And I think we have to consider too, if his recycling business would look like what Government Gulch site looks like. If that's something we want out by the freeway, I think there'd be a lot to consider.
Yeah, whether it'll cause a blight or.
If it's going to create how he could screen that, et cetera. So
you wouldn't from the freeway.
yeah, so that would be a challenge. Okay, back up on that. I just brought that up out of order because it was related to Government Gulch. The same party might be interested in one or the other of those pieces.
Okay.
We already approved the Government Gulch one to put on the list for research for sale. Have you done any further?
So I made a map of the Government Gulch one so that we can have a reference of what we're talking about. It is a bit of a mess up there on what you have and what you don't have. This area in blue is the identified piece that the county owns that it received from ASARCO back in the ASARCO trade of properties. You can see by all those yellow lines all over the place that there's a myriad of old mining claims coming here and crossing over. The old railroad right-of-ways were never formally abandoned, so they still apply.
Wow.
So they still show up. And so it's a weird thing of, well, is that railroad right away going through there and around the back? Well, it was, but not gonna be in the future, but it's not been formally vacated or conveyed away by the railroad. So, and because of the lack of development, the issue's never been pushed. But here we know, this is the description, which is a portion of these different claims that was originally part of the old zinc plant. So yes, the big zinc plant sits there. There's some waste materials down here, and I think this is relatively new enough imagery. It's 2 or 3 years old, that this is what's going on with the Creedom and recycling stuff. Is they bring stuff in, store down there, and do whatever they do with it. In the past, we stored green waste materials out in this area. We've stored stuff up in there, but this is that access road that goes up and comes up behind the zinc plant. So there's usable space, and the county's used it for a variety of things over the years, and that's why we've had it and kept it and used it. As far as selling it, that was probably nobody ever offered, really. But we've taken advantage of the opportunity to lease it to different folks over the years. There was a firewood packaging deal up there where they kept wood up into fire bundles and do that. And then lately, Creedom has been in there. So I think we still store some of our green waste there now. That just happens to be cleared out. But so that was the what do we have there? I don't know if we can sell all of it. I don't know who wants to buy the old zinc plant. There's all kinds of contamination issues with that building, and and they stopped tearing it down because the material coming out of it was just better to leave it in place, and not mess with it. So all the concrete they're breaking. So there's issues with that, and that's why it kind of was stopped in partial disassembly. But we have every option. It's within the city of Kellogg's jurisdiction, so it is a city of Kellogg parcel, subject to their zoning and their requirements. I believe it's industrial or whatever their highest industrial is. And I think that's their future intent as well. So it makes sense to do
What we've been doing.
things that are not what people want to see or look at.
Is it a piece of property we can sell, or is it,
I don't know
do
why
they
we
have
couldn't.
stipulations that we can't?
We'd probably want to verify with DEQ. I would expect there to be some sort of covenants with it or some disclosures that, hey, what you're buying is Ground Central. So I wouldn't know that there's any, I've not heard of any kind of restrictions or limitations to being able to sell it. So
Okay.
it would just be a matter of passing those on to whoever is going to purchase it. So, I think my suggestion would be that maybe we consider it similar to the transfer station in that maybe we consider, should it be divided up to where we could sell pieces? Does it seem reasonable to sell the whole thing? Or does it seem reasonable to keep our options available for leasing it to different uses or using it for ourselves? There's been a lot of talk about at some point, now that we don't have the corner lot for all the gravel, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they move most of that up here? And so, it's a storage yard for our gravel source now.
So this is where
There's
we
some-
are storing gravel
Is
right
that-
now.
That's my understanding, but I've
Or
not
is it up
been up there to
further?
find out.
I thought it was up further.
But it may.
So this is the one we already put on the list to consider selling. Again, if our research shows otherwise, we may go back to trying to lease a portion of it. Right now, we have been leasing a portion of it that will expire in July.
Okay.
And so we'll need to make some decision about that. That is on the for sale list at this point. The next piece that we have received requests for, and again, that's where this list came from, are pieces that people have asked about, is this piece ending in 0070 in Silverton. It's an L-shaped piece. We discussed it a week or two ago because the right-hand eastern corner was part of what they wanted to turn into a ball field and part of what we stored. These people are interested in purchasing all of it or just the western 2 acres if we want to keep the.
Is that the one we looked at, subdividing the L off?
Yeah, we could just take the L off.
Keep
They
it to the county.
just want they'll take any or all, I think. But my point is we have somebody interested, so I think we should.
Okay.
I think we should consider putting it on the list and doing the research and seeing
I would
if we
agree.
want to subdivide it and sell part of it. Um,
I'm good with that one.
okay, and I'd entertain a motion to put the Silverton property ending in 0070 on the list for potential sale.
So moved.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, okay. All right, I was
Right, and
giving
aye
you,
at the same time.
I knew what you were doing. Now I'm getting your system down. In Smelterville, we have two pieces of property, which I think we are all familiar with, that we were approached by a company interested in leasing or buying. And so I'm suggesting here that we put them on the list to consider for potential sale. These are the two properties east of the settling. Is that the proper term for those ponds, the sewer?
We should have sewer treatment ponds.
The sewer treatment ponds between there and the hospital outreach, whatever that building is.
Okay.
Because I put them on the list because we've had somebody interested in purchasing.
Okay.
And you see my notes of things we have to think about, whether we want to try and move the sewer, or if we just want to sell them and let him deal with that, or et cetera. But I would like to formally suggest we put them on the list of potential sale properties so we could pursue it.
Would be similar to like the Maverick property, you have to annex the sewer. Or would you-
I don't know. That's why I think if we put it on the list, we'd have to do the research
Okay,
and decide.
There would be a lot of those questions or
Yeah.
those figuring out what's what on that property. And some of it we already know, but other ones would be, what do we do about it? And, you know, as far
And
as
you
that
kind of
goes,
indicated before that there are possible grants we can get to actually move that sewer line and
right.
fix it up ourselves and be able to get more money out of it.
There's different types of block grants and other sources for community development purposes. And because the utilities and infrastructure is so expensive that it's difficult for developers. So yeah, there's those different types of grants. And some of those grants were the ones they've already used throughout the valley. When they did the roads program, they went and got development grants to put new sewer and water stuff in the road before they did the pavement. And they were able to utilize the paved roads projects to repave the road as a match to the infrastructure replacement. So there's definitely opportunities out there. And that was part of the idea with that property. That Smelterville sewer main line runs diagonally across that property, and it needs to be moved somewhere to make that property more useful. It's not very deep, and so it creates there's a mound, on top of the property. And so, one way or the other, the property needs to be lifted or the pipe needs to be lowered, one or the other. Ideally, if you're going to move it, you'd move it to a boundary or to a side, and not be over the top of it with buildings and or development. So that was the prospect there, was to look at what is the adequate fix for that. And then, of course, what does Smelterville Sewer want to do? What does South Fork Sewer want to do? What is the best option there? The next infrastructure thing was the continuation of Commerce Drive. And then again, that area was sort of pre-developed that way. And that base is I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm going to say 50% there. So finishing that road and building it up and creating an intersection is just the next step, but that's expensive, and then somebody has to bear that cost. So yeah, there's certainly some development opportunities there. And if there's some grant monies available to us as a county versus an individual developer, there's usually more available to government entities in that regard, or to the sewer. Maybe it's a grant the sewer and water districts get, to be able to help afford them to move the line. So,
So the third option is to have whoever buys it deal with it and sell them the road if in fact it dead ends on their property, and let them deal with the road improvement. But today I'm suggesting that we put those two pieces on the list for pieces that we want to research and potentially market.
okay,
Okay, I would entertain a motion to add parcels ending in 001A and 6150 in Smelterville to the list of potential properties for sale.
so moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So those are on the list. So we'll be getting back with you guys in P&Z about what our options are on there. I think there's a lot of research to be done. The Polaris Peak, I put it on the list because we had somebody reach out. I don't even remember who it was at the moment. A gentleman reached out to us a couple, 3-4 weeks ago, I think, asking after we announced that we might be selling some vacant land, about this Polaris Peak, which I believe is the old dump. Which I think is like a 30 or 20 acre dump site. So P and Z, what do you got on that one?
Not anything specific. I didn't have that list, but I know about this property. It's definitely was the old landfill. So it's got a huge, long history. We quit using it because it was basically full. And that's when we started shipping stuff off to Missoula, is my best understanding of that. We've used it periodically over the years to store, especially in the wet season, to store green waste and stuff up there. For a while, they kept taking, the heavy construction waste, concrete chunks and a lot of stuff up there, but they quickly were figuring out, what are we gonna do with it? After we get it up here, it's creating a mess. And so they quit doing that, and they were having a hard time getting those heavy trucks up there. So they quit doing that. So then it's kind of sat, not used. We've been using the government Gulch property for the green waste now. And then that's gonna all change, of course, once we start utilizing the curtain burner. So it's gonna be less, need and use up there. I suppose nobody's ever, again, actually asked about, could they purchase it? It's an old dump site. It's got all the dirty, nasty stuff comes with
Somebody
an old
else
dump
already
site.
purchased part of that up there.
And so it would just be that exploration of, well, what does that mean? Does that mean it's undoable, or does that mean you just need to know about it? And so it really does beg the question of, well, we'd want to seek out advice from DEQ, panel health, somebody that might be able to tell us, what does that mean? And do we have any covenants or restrictions? If we don't need it anymore, I don't know why we couldn't sell it. But it would be kind of one of those, similar thing you asked me about a property down in Calder, and, there was an old landfill site down there that had been abandoned over the years. And we'd swapped that property and so that the surrounding property owner could own that and manage it, because it was a county property. That's where people went to hang out and cause trouble and make a mess and do stuff like that. So similar to that, I don't know that we couldn't. It would just be the health risk or the environmental risk of what is there. And is that simply a disclosure, or is that
right?
Yeah, maybe I don't know.
Were you in on the other lot that was sold up there? There was another acreage sold up there, was it 2 years ago?
I don't know that it was part of the, was it part of the dump? I don't know that it was part of the dump. So there might be dump waste on it, but I don't readily know of that.
And I was there 32 years ago, and no, that dump was a perfectly good dump. And we just could no longer meet regulations with an open dump. And every time the wind blew, much of it ended up back down on the freeway. And so, yeah, we ran into some issues and a lot of heartache over closing that dump. All right, well, I'm gonna recommend we put this Polaris Peak piece on the list for potential sale and do the research to see if we can sell it or not.
So moved.
So
Okay.
moved,
I'll second.
and that piece ends in 550A, which I think I gave you the list, right? So you've got it all today, and we're doing better.
This is a lot,
Okay.
yeah.
Any other discussion on that piece? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 So we'll put that on there, and we'll be back with P and Z and getting your recommendations on who all we need to reach out to. I think we need to talk to our Public Works, who's used it in the past, and transfer station, to make sure we have everybody's input before we do something. Somebody was like, oh, no, we were gonna save that for something. But
Right.
at least we can do the research now. The last piece I have on here, that we've been not asked about purchasing, but it was on our list last week that we tabled for a week. It was listed as a parcel ending in 0800 in the St. Joe, and it's on our list of pieces that we have been leasing in the past. Apparently it's been leased as a hunting camp.
190.
And when I did the research, we found that we owned the piece next to it that ends in 1900. But it was listed last week. It is listed on the lease as ending in 0800, which is somebody else's land. So I believe we are talking about county land ending in 1900 up Boulder Creek, up Marble Creek, up Boulder Creek. It's a 40-acre square. Yep. And, we said last week we would bring it back up. It's been leased in the past. Apparently, the county accepted a check for rent money in December before the current commission took office, but there is no renewed lease on it. So the status is listed as confusing. We took the money but didn't renew a lease. We either need to lease it, put it on the list of properties that we started last week for leasing, or we need to put it on the list for selling, or we need to take it off the market and keep it as a mountaintop. It appears to be a steep, rocky mountain. But it is 40 acres. So what is your pleasure? Take it off the market, continue to lease it and put it in our list of how, and which we need to decide today how we're going to market, or go ahead and put it on I put it on the potential for selling. It's 40 acres. I have no idea what that would bring, 40 acres of logged mountaintop, but I'd like to see it back on the tax rolls. And I haven't talked to the people that have leased it in the past. I haven't talked to anybody yet. I'm just suggesting we put it on there for research. But
Okay.
I agree.
okay. Then I would entertain a motion to move the parcel ending in 1900 Marble Creek / Boulder Creek to the list of properties for potential sale, for research and potential sale.
So moved.
A second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. So part of that research, I'll reach out to the people who've leased it in the past. I think we're going to need to send them a refund since we have been holding their money and don't even have a lease agreement in place with them. But we can work on that. All right, those are the pieces that I was aware of from talking to the two of you or my own emails. Do either of you have any other properties that you think we should add to the potential for sale list at this time? Or does P&Z have any vacant properties you're aware of that are sitting vacant that we might consider, again, with the goal of getting them on the tax rolls and getting them into?
These are the ones that I've always been aware of these properties. So I don't know if there aren't other county-owned properties that might be suitable for development, but as you know, in my role as planner, I've always kind of kept an eye out for those things, and some of these questions and projects have always been part of the discussion. So I'm not aware of any additional ones. So if there are any, we can just always entertain them as we identify them. But these are the ones that I've always been at least somewhat aware of.
And they all have different requirements. I don't know that we'll ever be able to put them all up for sale on the same day. I think we do the research and we start to put them on the market.
Mhm.
When it comes to this list of land for potential sale, I would like to recommend that we, in addition to first doing our own research with our own staff and crew to figure out what is and what we do and don't want to do as far as the county's plan goes, I think we should consider reaching out and getting an RFP from county realtor realty agencies to help us potentially do the research and market and or eventually sell the lands that we do decide to sell.
I would agree. That would be good.
I would like to, I'll make a motion. You guys can decide what you want to do. I would move that we do a request for proposal from all realty companies in the valley, or not the valley, in the county, and see who might give us the best proposal on helping us represent us in marketing these properties for the highest possible dollar, assuming they pass all of our other criteria for selling. I'm not saying we're selling the transfer station.
So if they pass, then yeah.
If we've decided to sell them,
With local, not. out
that
of
we
the
would
county,
use a
right?
realtor from our county.
Okay,
Yeah.
I will second that.
Okay, I've proposed it, I've motioned it, she seconded it. Any thoughts or
No.
discussion or amendments? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. So, and with the board's permission, I'll draft a letter, run it through all of you, and then send it to every realtor in the county to see what they would propose. I'm going to recommend that before we ask a realtor, contract with the realtor, once we have a proposal, that we go ahead and review all of these in more detail with P and Z and in any other recommended steps, DEQ, Panhandle Health, our own county, solid waste, public works, and make sure that we're absolutely certain what we want to do before we turn them over to a realtor. If that makes sense to everybody.
Yes.
Trying to figure out how we keep this ball rolling, because I know we have some people interested in buying now. And all right. I think we need to think about how we're going to advertise. Getting a realty might be the best way, because that would make it on the what do realtors call it? The MLS.
Mhm.
That would absolutely be the best way to make sure everybody in the county knows or could know. We could also advertise in the paper and on our website.
I think we need to, would explore that we're different than every other Joe property owner. In that most of these would probably end up having to go out for some sort of an auction. And so
Yeah.
we'd be advertising an auction with a list of.
What would
this is
happen
you're
is,
auctioning.
is you go out and you let your realtor know that. And so if somebody comes in with a bid, we accept all offers on contingency that they will be auctioned. So basically you set that up for, if somebody offers you 100,000 for it, we, tell the buyer that it's gonna go to public auction. That's the opening bid. So they're to come here, and then if we have somebody else interested in, they may bid it up, or that's.
Right.
kind
So
of-
there'd be that little bit different process versus just sticking it on MLS. And
Exactly.
hoping somebody comes
But the MLS would help us get it marketed.
marketed.
We had a realtor to do the showing, so we're not having county commissioners out trying to show land in Boulder Creek.
Mhm.
And we,
And then make a decision on.
and then we make a decision. Yeah. And
Understood.
I vote Tracy goes.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I think that's the direction if we're headed. Does that make sense to everybody else?
Yeah.
Again, we're brainstorming in front of the public, which is the legal way to do this. That's my understanding. So we're making these decisions in front of the public. Last week, we voted to set aside parcel ending in 8110 to explore creating a parking lot. I would like to keep working on that project by recommending that we get Public Works input to what it might take to start to turn it into a parking lot while we're simultaneously pursuing grants.
Mhm.
I'm not saying we should go spend money on it yet. I'm saying we should go ahead and have our Public Works look at what fencing and access and things would be. And then, do you have any idea where we are in that grant process? Like,
No, Kootenai County was asking that they move out the date of, the final date to accept their petitions. And I don't know where
if
that's
they
at,
did that,
if they did that or not.
just because Kootenai County asked.
Mhm.
What about us?
So we submitted our ideas.
Yep,
And
the
then they will
ideas are
reform them or review them and
Yep.
come back with.
That being said, I'm going to try and schedule a meeting, if it's all right with you all, that we would all invite all of ourselves to go out and look at it with Public Works
Mhm.
and explore the property, and we can take Sydney along and
Yeah.
and go out and do that. I'll try to get Public Works in Sydney to work out a time for that, probably on a Monday or a Friday.
Yep.
That would make sense.
Mhm.
I have been asked by the media if we thought that is something that could be used in 23. And I have said we'd have a meeting today and discuss it. My goal would be as soon as we can do it right. I don't know when we can do it right.
It all depends on their,
Yep.
I think,
Research.
And funding.
the scope of that might be simple enough that you could probably put, you might be able to put something together and do some work and
Mhm.
maybe do something before the end of summer. Awesome. The scope of it might be, we need more work to be done. We need some more preliminary, decisions to be made and some more funding to be found, to do it right. And it may be something we build as a project and build it for next summer and make it really worthwhile. So, but I agree, there's potential and a couple different ideas. Even if you did something small,
Mhm.
you could get started, and then almost like work out some of the kinks.
Mhm.
And then next summer really hit it with something bigger. I think I've got a number of ideas from other folks I've talked with as well, but I think I can work with Public Works on, there's some different things you can do there to make quick use of it, but make it maintainable and not a
Well,
mud,
then
not a
we'll-
mud pit, not, you know.
If it's all right with the
maintenance
board,
issues.
let's invite P and Z to come with us when we go with Public Works.
Okay.
And we'll just get all the brains in one spot.
I think you can look at different things like, temporary fencing for the summer months, but the rest of the year,
Mhm.
you can close it. You don't have to let people park there year round.
Yeah.
And really, the only real use is gonna be
Summertime.
between May and September anyway.
Mhm.
So,
And people have been asking and I have been telling them, and so I'll share this with the board in case you have different mind, that our ultimate goal here is paid parking so that we start to collect some sort of user fees from out of area visitors to help offset the costs of waste and law enforcement and things up the
Mhm.
river, that we are looking at eventually a paid parking
Yeah.
facility.
And like,
Yeah.
and not overnight parking is.
We've had people concerned that we might be attracting people to the county. I think if we force
They're
them to
already
start
here.
paying their way,
they're already here.
some people may decide to go elsewhere if they actually have to pay to play.
Yeah.
But I think we need to get people to start to pay to play.
Well, and the biggest problem we have is parking. And Bumblebee is a good example where, we're overrun. So
Mhm.
this is basically to help that situation.
Do you think
Yeah.
if you ask for paid parking, if they're gonna go, well, I don't wanna do that, I'm just gonna go park anywhere and still cause that problem up the river
I don't think you're
with,
gonna,
with
yeah,
that parking?
I don't think you have a chance of eliminating the problem.
Mhm.
But I mean, unless you pass some rules and ordinances about no parking within these certain areas of right of ways, and that's completely an
And the
option.
sheriff
Yeah.
has
Mhm.
approached me about
We've,
that.
we've never
Yeah.
really wanted to carry that big a stick but, certainly there's a time, the right time and place for it. And, but these kinds of things will help relieve that as an issue.
Exactly.
There's some folks that I won't speak for them, but they in the past have voiced issue or questioning that issue. They have property just above Bumblebee that potentially could be a private parking lot. They just haven't got there yet to look at what does that development look like. So there's other opportunities. That's been one of our shortfalls is, there's lots of private property. So who's going to open a parking lot?
Mhm.
And so here we've identified, we either have right of way or we've identified this acreage that potentially could be, really be a relief. And if it relieves 50 cars or 100 cars, that will be a big difference to
Yeah.
Albert's Landing and Bumblebee intersection,
Mhm.
even if it's just those two,
And the sheriff has broached the idea of us creating a little stronger parking ordinances up there to control it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In fairness, if we gave people an alternative, go pay your
That's where you make
fee
that
and
happen
park
fairly,
legally,
right?
or face a fine of even more. Either way, we're gonna start collecting
And your
funding
vehicle
from
towed.
out of area
Yeah.
Towing
people
expense.
to pay for the problem that's being created up there. So,
Mhm.
all right. That was in my notes that we had to cover from last time. We also said that we would discuss how we're going to lease the properties that we put on the lease list. This is a brainstorm session now, folks. We have created a list now of properties we've said we will continue to lease. We have people hoping to use them this year. We probably need to set that. Do we want to come up with some sort of a advertising scheme that gets it out to the public and then we accept the highest bid for these? I think the big complaint has been no one knew they were available and they weren't by then, practically speaking, they weren't available to everybody in the county because no one knew about them. Do we want to advertise? Do we want to hire advertising? Do we just want to put it out on all of our own sources in the newspaper? How do we want to let everybody know that here's a list of the properties? You got X weeks to go check it out. And then are we going to accept, highest bid? Are we going to set a minimum bid? What do we want to do?
I think what we ought to do is do the sites that are camping only, dry camping or whatever. I think, we could do that or maybe auction them off. Or we can do a sealed bid. But I think, it would, give everybody a chance to come and bid on those, especially the ones that,
The ones that have been renting for 6 months or
yeah.
5 months.
I say utilize our websites and stuff
Mhm.
for free advertising rather than paying to have it advertised.
I agree. And I
you would
think we
take
should
camping
use,
only and do
put
an
in there
auction.
for, Shoshone County residents only.
Think we can do that legally?
You know, we would have to
I
talk
don't
to,
know the answer to that.
we would have
If I
to
could-
talk to legal because it is Shoshone County property and they're Shoshone County taxpayers, so.
We might be able to give a incentive to somebody who's already paying taxes, but I don't know if we could screen other US citizens or not. I understand
You were
your,
owners of the property, but we'd have to, maybe we should look at that.
all right.
I mean, I
Would you
like
mind
the idea,
If I could
but
interrupt, I might add in, when we left that meeting last week, we went through the list of properties that had already been leased in the past or were currently being leased. We left out 7 or 8 properties, I think I counted here. Yeah, 8 different properties that we didn't discuss and didn't get in your motions last week on what to do with them.
I thought we moved to add them all to the list
Mm-hmm.
at the very end of the meeting.
To the
Yeah.
total list of just discussed.
We added them all into the
Okay,
list.
but then, so there's those ones, and then of those, there's 3, 4, 5, there's 6 of them that either have explanations for or are likely to be, we probably shouldn't have them on that list of auctionable, so we want to put a list out there that says you can bid on these and here's the maps for them and here's what you're gonna get if you auction. These other ones are like, they're that little weird piece on the guy's driveway. There's a little piece on the side of his
Okay.
property and that.
Yeah,
So,
we wouldn't
so
put those
we
on.
would not want to put those on the list. And so I don't know if that decision had been, or where that falls in. If we included them in all last week's motions, then I'm fine with it. But as we go through that list, there were those 6 or 7.
We
that I
included
still
them to
had on.
lease, but we haven't determined if we would lease them to the adjoining property owner or we'd
And that's
auction
where
them
most
off
of them
to the.
fall into. They're not really conducive to the public, but they might be conducive to the adjacent property owner. And that's where we can look at a nominal rate or whatever that rate.
Well,
might
Jeff used the word camping only. That might not be a bad way to categorize these recreational pieces that serve no other purpose than seasonal. They're not supposed to have anything on them.
Yeah, because you'd want to put some limitations on, you wouldn't want people to, store stuff on the property, for the summer. You'd want them to utilize them for some list of specific uses so that you could.
Recreational properties.
Recreational use was the intent of these. Now, these other one where, like out in Catawba, it's probably for agricultural uses. They're gonna hay it more, they're thought, I guess, if somebody wanted to put an RV on the front part, okay, I guess they can do that. Anywho, so that would be, yeah, you definitely want to put some stipulations into limited use.
Well, in the interest of time, I would recommend we come back together next week and have done the research and pull out a list of what we think are the recreational properties.
Okay.
okay,
And then because we're going to want to get them on the market as soon as we can for these
Exactly.
folks, can we go ahead and decide once we make that list next week, how we're going to handle them? We're going to advertise.
Okay.
We're going to, I'm open to ideas here.
Advertise, auction them or, however we want to get.
We want to do sealed bid or auction? Like, and by auction, I assume you mean live.
Yeah, a live auction. Sealed bid kind of gives everybody a chance to be able to bid on it because a live auction might not give the people that are working that day a chance to come
Right.
down. So,
Or it's intimidating,
yeah,
yeah.
whereas you have a little bit of anonymity.
The sealed bids, I
if you
think,
put your
would work.
sealed bid
We
in.
could try sealed for this year and see how we
Yeah.
think it works.
Okay.
So next week, we would select which ones we're considering seasonal recreational versus residential and these others.
Okay.
Next week, though, after that's picked, we would go ahead and agree to advertise newspaper, website. I'll try and get the newspaper to maybe run a story for us on explaining, but how are we going to make these? What would be the best way to make the information available when people start to call Sydney and go, hey, where is this property? Or
Is there a
maybe a
place?
I
website.
think we want to maybe use as an idea is how we do the tax deed property sale. That has some legal ramifications for, doing the legal notice in the paper. So that's how
Mhm.
people figure it out. There's a time frame for that every year. So people expect it, but similar to that.
And they
where-
could come in and look up the
where we can
properties.
put together
right?
the list of properties in a map and they can come in and go, well, I think I wouldn't mind bidding on that one. And so, you know, I'll go figure out whether it's worth $500 to me or $5,000 to me. And then put in my bid. And then there's a way to look at that without taking up each and every time somebody wants to do, we gotta put, like the tax deed, you've gotta put together the deed
Have a
package so
little
that,
binder.
so that Sydney's not answering that question 22 times. We're not answering that question 22 times.
Yeah,
It's very time consuming when that
So she
property
usually
list
just
is
hands the
long.
binder to them. They can look
Yeah,
through it
yeah.
and write down what they wanna go look at and.
maybe we can put that on, you know, talk to PJ or BJ and see if we can put that on our website to where they can go to our site and say, these are the properties and these are the pictures, and then they're
The
gonna
numbers.
always be on there.
And they
Just
can go to the
direct them.
GIS part too, if they wanna
Yeah.
look them up, the location and.
People struggle with how to use that, but
I
yeah.
know, it's,
Um,
but if we have the map attached.
So in the
there's a way
next,
to link it.
in the next week, I think what I'm trying to do is set up our assignments. In the next week, we need to individually be thinking about which properties we think are recreational, seasonal, summer leases.
Okay.
And we also need to be thinking about how we're gonna put these packets together ASAP and get them out, because nobody wants to rent summer property at the end of July.
No.
So we've got to get them out there. Like, I'd be nice if next week would say the clock starts today, 2 weeks from today, we will accept sealed bids.
Mhm.
But, you know, I just don't want to wait till the end of
This is
June,
a bit of an
July.
odd, yes, process. I don't know what our legal noticing requirements are.
For leasing property.
Yeah.
Well, we haven't been noticing it at all.
Right, so that might, I don't know, I can't readily think of that there is one. Certainly
But
don't
we'll-
wanna go get 3 weeks down the line and figure
But
out.
we're
we
gonna
should've
get
done
our
52 weeks
attorney's
ago.
advice on
Yeah.
this.
So I think that that's a question we need to make
Mhm.
sure, and we can.
See, to
address
sell
that.
property, we have to give a 10-day notice to sell the property.
So if we're just leasing it, what does that, you know,
Yeah.
and then if you're gonna make it, you're gonna ultimately have to make a decision, so maybe that's the part that has to get
Mhm.
at least on the agenda, so it shows up next week, you know.
Mhm.
So we wanna clarify that we're doing it.
So
clearly.
probably next Wednesday if we can.
You guys have a lease agreement or a form, or does that? need
We
to
do,
be-
but I don't think that they're,
They're kind of vary, so I think we need to revise.
not everyone's been signing the same lease.
Yeah.
Nor has there been any uniformity in pricing, and there's been no noticing. So
Mhm.
these are all new things that we have to, I think we need to, in the next week, the three of us need to look at those leases and see if one of them suits us, and or run it by Ben and see if he could take the best one. And
I think we need to put you know, like a 2 campers only, or, you know, we need to put a stipulation on how many RVs or whatever they have on it. So
Yeah,
that we
depending
don't,
on the size of the lot
Uh-huh.
for.
Yeah.
Some kind of,
yeah, because at
Guidelines
some
of-
point we're contributing to the
Mhm.
waste problem that we already have up the river. So there's a lot to be considered. The only reason I'm trying to rush is I don't think anybody wants to wait until August to rent their.
yeah,
No.
I would really like to get this so that they're renting it in June.
Yep.
And getting themselves set up for July, August, September. And then most of them need to be off the property by
October.
what?
Well, there's no provisions. There used to be some provisions in flood code that required, you know, personal material be removed from the floodway designated area. That was always confused with the rest of the floodplain. And then that date was put in there from some previous model of November 1st to March 31st. Back in 2021, when we updated our new floodplain ordinance, that's not a requirement of FEMA. We took it out. Again, we have floods
So we could set it by
after March
lease
31st.
agreement. I think we need to make it clear that they can't store things there all year. Cause then we have the problem of we lease it next year to the highest bidder and the last guy's stuff is still there.
Mhm.
right.
And I think there's been some abuse of the system where people have taken seasonal leases and left things on the property all year round. So,
Mhm.
so we do need a tighter lease. I'd like to divide this up a little bit. Who's willing to take the lease and work with Ben and try to get a tighter lease?
I can do that.
Okay, it's all right with you?
Yep,
Jeff,
that's fine.
Jeff's going to
will do the
take,
lease.
work on a tighter lease. Okay. What else needs to be done by next week? All three of us need to be looking at the list and deciding what we think is recreational.
And I think we can, as P and Z, I think because of our experience, I think I can put that list together for you.
Okay.
And then, and with some explanation of the other ones in case you had ideas about the other ones. And then a separate list of the reasons why there's the other FEMA properties that were not on that list. If somebody's gonna ask,
Mhm.
well, why isn't this one available? Well, no, there's our reasoning. Or just be able to come out and go, here's our list of 10. These are the ones that are available this year. Next year, we might have others, you know.
Yep.
But for right now, let's figure out the 7 or 8 or 10 that are actually doable.
And we need
I
to
think
start
put
with the
list
ones that
together for
we
you. Yeah,
have
start
people
with those
waiting on,
and go forth with that list.
trying to be cognizant of the folks who, you know, have had them in the past. But we, at the same time, I think if it's all right with you, Tracy, I will explore the advertising
Okay.
angle. As far as how we're gonna get the word out. I think one of the biggest criticisms we've heard is nobody knew.
Yeah.
So we've got to figure out a way to make sure everybody in the county is aware. And Jeff, since you're pursuing the legal part with the lease, would you mind pursuing with Ben this idea you had about whether it can be county residents only or not?
Yeah.
Would you, I think we should get an answer on that question before we play with that. I'll pursue the advertising part of it. If you wouldn't mind working with P and Z to make sure we have our data as far as when we get ready to vote on what's gonna be recreational or not. If you would be working with them as far as trying to break out these properties on what's recreational.
We can produce that new list.
And if you'll just make sure that happens.
Yeah.
If you'd be the action person on that one. And or
We can do
anything
that.
else you want to work on. I'm just thinking, we want to make sure this happens in 1 week, so.
I can work with Sydney to keeping a binder. When people do come to the counter, it is nice just to hand them that binder of what properties. to
Put it
look at.
together almost like.
But if we could do it,
You know,
we could put a digital version out, that sure
that'd
would
be-
be
helpful
sweet.
as well, but you'll get the old time that want to look at the book.
Okay.
It won't be,
We can do both. So we can produce a map and then with some property information
Description.
and locate so people can identify where it is.
Okay,
We drive by.
we're about up on time. Is there anything else that we should be doing right now for this next week's meeting on this issue? Are we good?
Yep.
Are we good?
That's a lot.
Okay.
no,
We're changing history and people are like, why couldn't you have done this sooner? Well, did it as soon as we could. So, all right. No further comments from P and Z? Closing comments? Any further comments from the board? Okay, meeting is adjourned.